My name is Rachel.
And I'm Allie.
And we're here today to take a look at bicycle and pedestrian crash risk in the city of Philadelphia. We're going to be building a statistical model to attempt to identify the significant explanatory variables related to crashes that result in serious injuries or fatalities. Why are we building this model? There are a lot of reasons. Nationally, there has been an uptick in traffic deaths in the last 2 years. The last few decades had seen steady decline until 2015, when there was a 7% increase, and this was followed by a 6% increase in 2016. This 2-year uptick of 14% is the largest increase since the 1960s. Zooming closer in at the local level, Philadelphia is also plagued by high rates of traffic fatalities. In 2015, Philadelphia had a rate of traffic-related deaths of 6 people per every 100,000 residents. This is high when compared with New York City's rate of 2.87 or San Francisco's rate of 4.39. To deal with this issue, Philadelphia recently committed to Vision Zero, which is centered around the goal of reducing traffic-related deaths to zero in Philadelphia by 2030. The city launched a Vision Zero task force in November of 2016 and has just released their draft 3-year Vision Zero action plan for public comment. Philadelphia, like many cities, plans to use a data-driven approach in their Vision Zero efforts and identifies crash data analysis as a key step in the evaluation portion of their plan. This data analysis process can help prioritize Vision Zero policy interventions, safety investments, and roadway design change. We hope that our study can be helpful in this respect. This data-driven approach is a departure from the way that traffic engineers have commonly focused on crashes. They typically take into account roadway conditions as causal factors, but don't consider the broader picture, including demographics, socioeconomics, or land use factors. Bringing the analysis to a broader level can help identify overarching patterns. This type of model has been used by other cities in pursuit of Vision Zero, and we sought guidance from a paper by Brozin and Shockley, who surveyed similar model building efforts around the country. This paper distills common themes related to bicycle and pedestrian crashes and provided helpful context and guidance for us throughout our process. The statistical question we sought to answer was, what are the characteristics of an intersection that make it more or less likely to have fatal or serious bicycle or pedestrian crashes? The dependent variable of our model was a binary crash factor. The data was collected from 2011 to 2014 and was available through Open Data Philly. We used each 100-foot buffer of the intersection as the unit of analysis and ultimately chose to do a binomial logistic model. Originally, we had planned to do a linear regression and tried to predict for the number of crashes, but this model was predicting poorly, so we changed our analysis and found much more predictive power in getting the model to tell us, would there be a crash here, yes or no? We created the intersection shapefile in ArcGIS by using the network analyst on a street shapefile to create a junction at each intersection. A 100-foot buffer was created around each intersection, and this was used to join with most of our other explanatory variables. The explanatory variables we included in the model building process primarily fell into 2 categories: built environment and demographic and socioeconomic. The built environment variables, the source of this data was primarily from Open Data Philly as well as the DVRPC. Each point shapefile was then joined to the 100-foot intersection buffer using spatial joints in ArcGIS. Our next category you can see is demographics, and it also includes socioeconomic. This data was from the American Community Survey from 2014. We accessed this using their API and then joined it in ArcGIS at the census tract level. And ultimately, each intersection was given its tract level census attributes. We also included 311 calls. We thought this would be reflective of problems with the built environment. To build our model, first we cleaned up the NAs. Next, we wanted to assess variable distribution, and we did end up manipulating some variables to improve the model fit. For instance, we divided census tract population by the land area of each tract to create a population density variable. Because census tracts each have approximately the same number of people, this is not a meaningful predictor until it is normalized. We used a similar approach to create density of each age group, and we also created binary variables. We used this to represent school zones, areas near parks, one-way streets, trolley tracks, and commercial corridors. Other variables, including bike lane types and 311 calls, were transformed into categorical variables. We did not ultimately apply any log or square transformations, as independent variables do not need to be normally distributed in logistic regression. Next in our model building process, we removed outliers. This ended up dropping 15% of the data, but we still had over 20,000 observations. Next, we tested for correlation and removed any variables that were overly highly correlated. And then we ran an ANOVA test. This helped us determine our variable set. We then calculated the VIF to ensure that no variables used in our model were highly correlated. As you can see, all of the variables are under 5, meaning the model does not suffer from multicollinearity. And finally, we assessed the significance of all variables to ensure that they were contributing to the predictive power of our model.
Thanks, Rachel. So ultimately, we ended up including the variables that you see in bolded blue on this slide, and I will take you through the interpretation of these different explanatory variables. Ultimately, our model was able to explain a strong amount of the difference between intersections with and without crashes. Our McFadden pseudo R-squared of 0.18 is just shy of the 0.2 to 0.4 range of excellent fit. And the graphic on the left shows all of our independent variables and ranks them from largest to smallest odds ratio, including stars for the level of significance, and blue for those positively correlated with a crash at an intersection, and red for those negatively correlated with a crash at an intersection. For each additional percent of the population that is middle-aged, an intersection's odds of having a crash increases 22.5 times. Similarly, for the additional percent of the population that walks to work, an intersection's odds of having a crash increases 13.7 times. For an additional percent of the housing stock that is vacant, an intersection's odds of having a crash increases 6.5 times. And for each additional percent of the population living in poverty, an intersection's odds of having a crash increases 2.8 times. Our most powerful categorical variables include one-way streets. The odds of an intersection having a crash are 68% higher for one-way streets versus two-way streets. The odds of an intersection having a crash are 48% higher for commercial corridors versus intersections that are not within commercial corridors. An intersection having a crash are 25% lower for Sharrow and bus bike lanes versus other types of bike lanes. And the odds of an intersection having a crash are 37% lower for local streets versus busier street types. We were surprised that there were several variables that proved to have no effect on intersection safety, such as protected and buffered bike lanes, the presence of trolley tracks, average daily traffic, and speed limits.
In order to assess the predictive accuracy of our model,
we calculated a confusion matrix. This helps us understand if our model is over or under predicting for crashes at intersections. In the end, our model was able to predict accurately 87% of the time. Here you can see the breakdown by each combination of the confusion matrix. Ultimately, there were some issues and weaknesses of our model. We were not able to access potentially significant explanatory variables. The data that we got from DVRPC on bike and pedestrian counts was fairly spotty and didn't give us information for the whole city. Also, there is a difference in the predictive power of using a logistic regression versus a linear regression. For example, our model doesn't say how many crashes happen at an intersection, but rather whether or not there was at least one crash at an intersection. If we decide to do a linear regression, we don't have good behavioral data, such as speed or if the driver was on their foot or not, so that would be a limitation. Going forward, future researchers should investigate why the least infrastructure-heavy bike lanes proved to be the safest for intersection crashes, which went against our original hypothesis. It is important to keep in mind that we were looking at each intersection, and there are no bike lane types that provide protection within the actual intersection. It could also be that because combined bus bike lanes and sharrows position the rider in the center of the lane, it creates a safer mid-intersection condition than other bike lane types. In addition, riders may not feel as safe in these types of bike lanes and thus may bike more cautiously. Some policy implications for the city of Philadelphia include prioritizing street safety interventions in neighborhoods with a high percentage of the population living under the poverty line, since they are statistically significantly more likely to have a crash than neighborhoods with fewer individuals living under the poverty line. So that concludes our research. We hope that this model can be helpful as Philadelphia begins on its path towards zero. Thank you.